So you want to become a Spanish master? Well, the easiest way to start is by conjugations. So in this video, I'm going to be going over what are conjugations, how to use them, and every Spanish conjugation type. So what are conjugations? First of all, Spanish conjugations are used all the time, every second of the day. They're how you modify a verb according to the pronoun. Before anything else, we have to know that conjugations target verbs. Every language has verbs. For example, English has verbs like to drive, or to use, or to play. There's a bunch of them. And there's one tiny similarity that all these have. You see it? It's the word to. And with this to at the beginning, we have what is called the base form, or the infinitive. The infinitive is the starting point of every verb, because from there you can change it based on the context. Let me show you how we would do that in English. In English, we would take the verb, let's use to play, and then we combine it with our pronouns. And in English, the pronouns are I, you, he, she, we, they. And I'm going to include y'all just because it's really common and there's some form of it in pretty much every other language. So we take the verb to play minus the to, add the pronoun. Let's take the pronoun I. Example, to play minus to plus I play. And that's how it is for every verb in English. But this time, let's look closer and let's use every pronoun. I play, you play, we play, they play, y'all play, he plays, she plays. Do you see it? For he and she, we have to add an S, or else the context might not make a whole lot of sense. In Spanish, the conjugations are just like this, only they're used for every pronoun and not just he/she. If you understand this concept, it's going to make learning conjugations a whole lot easier. But there is still another little challenge you have to learn before you go on to conjugate Spanish verbs. Remember how I said that in English, it's to blank, or to use, or to play, and how the to is in the beginning? In Spanish, it's kind of the opposite. Instead of to blank, it's blank to. And I'll go into more depth on this when I explain the conjugation grammar. But if you understand everything up to this point, learning conjugations is going to be a breeze. In Spanish, they have verb types, AR, ER, and IR. When you understand one, the rest will just kind of come to you. So let's take a Spanish infinitive verb and compare the conjugations to English. Let's use the verb usar, to use. So we have our infinitive, usar. We're going to conjugate it by removing the AR and adding different endings based on the context of the pronoun. And these are the Spanish pronouns. Yo, I, tú, you, él, he, ella, she, nosotros, nosotras, we, ellos, ellas, they, ustedes, y'all, or you guys, vosotros, vosotras, y'all, or you guys, again. And vosotros, vosotras is kind of interesting because no one really uses it outside of Spain. So if you're in Mexico, you won't hear it. If you're in Colombia, you won't hear it. If you're in Miami, you won't hear it. And even most people in South Spain don't say it. But I still think it's important to learn. So I'll make a separate conjugation video for it and explain how to use it exactly. Now, how do we conjugate the verbs? I'll show you. Let's take usar, subtract AR, and add one of these endings based on the pronoun. Yo, o, tú, has, él, ha, ella, ha, nosotros, nosotras, hamos, ellos, ellas, han, ustedes, han. As you can see, a lot of these pronouns take the same ending, like él and ella, or ellos, ellas, and ustedes. So to save time, I'm only going to be using one pronoun for each of the conjugations. So for él and ella, I'm just going to use él. For ellos, ellas, and ustedes, I'm just going to use ellos. And as a side note, if you're wondering why there's so many different forms, like ellos, ellas, nosotros, nosotras, vosotros, vosotras, it's all because of gender. Like, is a group of guys or a group of girls, and I'll make a separate video explaining all that. But back to the conjugations. This is how you connect the pronoun endings to the infinitive. Usar, yo uso, tú usas, él usa, nosotros usamos, ellos usan. See how the beginning's the same, but the ending changes based on whatever pronoun you're using? That's the key. And it's going to be like this for every Spanish verb conjugation type. And if you understand all this, congratulations, you just made it through the hardest part of the video. But remember how I said there's multiple conjugation types? We just went over one. There's still two more, ER and IR. But they're very easy, and I'll use some examples. Comer, yo como, tú comes, él come, nosotros comemos, ellos comen. See how we just removed the ER and added the endings? And how it's basically the exact same, but instead of AR, it's ER. Well, for IR verbs, it's basically the exact same as well. Abrir, yo abro, tú abres, él abre, nosotros abrimos, ellos abren. The only difference being instead of hemos, it's imos for the nosotros form. And just like that, you have the whole conjugation formula down and finally know how to conjugate in the present tense. which is the most used and most important. So now let's move on to the past tense. And the past tense has 4 different forms. The one most people learn first, and the most common one, is what we're going to be explaining first. It's el preterito, the preterite. And we're going to conjugate verbs using the same formula of AR, ER, and IR. And the way you do it is, I'll just put the conjugation on the screen since you already know. You remove the AR and add one of these endings out of all of them. For AR, it's e, aste, o, amos, aron. The ER, it's I, iste, yo, imos, ieron. And then it's basically the exact same for the IR. I, iste, yo, imos, ieron. It's just like that. So it's the exact same. E and I are the exact same, and A is similar, but it's like by itself. Take a little break, study all this, and then I'm gonna get back into the other stuff. Which once you understand all of that before, all of the next part is gonna be super easy, and you'll understand it just like that. And now the second past tense I'm gonna go over is the imperfect or imperfecto, and it's a little bit hard to explain, but you should be able to understand it pretty easily. And we're going to conjugate verbs using the same formula. Let's start with AR verbs and use the verb usar again. AR, yo haba, tú habas, él haba, nosotros habamos, ellos haban. IR, yo ia, tú ias, él ia, nosotros íamos, ellos ian. Now let's see how this looks in verbs. Yo usaba, tú usabas, él usaba, nosotros usábamos, ellos usaban. And then for ERIR, yo habría, tú habrías, él habría, nosotros habríamos, ellos habrían. Now, how do we use it? Think of it as you're in the act of doing something. Now, picture this. You have to hang up on your mom in order to reply to your friend. But were you finished calling your mom? No, you weren't. Llamaba a mi mamá antes de que me llamaras. Easy enough. Let's move on to the past perfect, el pretérito perfecto. This form of conjugation is essentially I have done. So the past perfect works a little bit weird. You're essentially combining 2 verbs into one, just like in English. In English, you have a verb, a pronoun, and a past participle. The verb do, its past participle is done. Verb play, its past participle is played. So I have done. I have played. In Spanish, you might be thinking, oh, I know how to say I have. It's tengo. And you would be right. Tengo does mean I have, but not in this context. In this context, we have to use the verb haber, which is essentially, it's closely translated as to have done. And haber's conjugations are yo he, tú has, él ha, nosotros hemos, ellos han. And then we take the participle of a verb. In a form, it's actually really easy. You take a verb, remove the AR, ER, or IR, and then add ado or ido. This is AR, this is ER, IR. Usar, usado, comer, comido, vivir, vivido. So in English, I have used would be yo he usado. And it's the same with every other pronoun. Yo he usado, tú has usado, él ha usado, etc. He comido, ha comido, and it just continues. And this conjugation type is really important because it's going to be the foundation for a lot of other conjugation types and Spanish knowledge for when you're more advanced. And the next few conjugations are going to follow suit in this theme. The next conjugation type is the past perfect. It's el pluscuamperfecto. It's like I had done. Not quite I have done, but like I had done. You take a form of the verb haber and change it slightly to había. And había doesn't really have a direct translation, but you can closely think of it as to had done in a way. This word also has conjugations. It's yo había, tú habías, él había, nosotros habíamos, ellos habían. So I had used would be había usado. And like I had eaten would be había comido. All right, simple enough. The next one is the perfect conditional, el condicional perfecto. It helps with stuff saying like I would have done. And it's habría hecho. I know this looks similar to the last form, but don't get them confused because they are different enough. The conjugations are yo habría, tú habrías, él habría, nosotros habríamos, ellos habrían. There's another form called the preterite anterior, el pretérito anterior. And it's another way of saying I had done is hube hecho. However, you will most likely never see this because it's used in literature and old speech type things. And now for the final form of the haber verbs, we have the future perfect, el futuro perfecto. This basically means I will have done. This one's also decently rare, but it's still used. Its conjugations are habré, habrás, habrá, habremos, habrán. Now you can see these endings are a little bit funny. These are the future tense conjugations. Spanish has this weird thing with haber, but they also have just a normal standard future tense. And it's essentially I will do. The conjugation endings are has, ha, hemos, han. Now let's use the verbs usar, comer, and abrir. Yo usaré, tú usarás, él usará, nosotros usaremos, ellos usarán. Comer, yo comeré, tú comerás, él comerá, nosotros comeremos, ellos comerán. Abrir, yo abriré, tú abrirás, él abrirá, nosotros abriremos, ellos abrirán. This next conjugation is sort of similar to a form of haber we did earlier. You remember the form habría? You see that little ia at the end? That's because it's part of the conditional. And the conditional is basically would. I would do, he would do, they would do, etc. The conjugation endings are ia, ias, ia, iamos, ian. And it's like that for all of them. It doesn't matter the verb type. It doesn't matter if it's ar, er, or ir. It's all going to work the same. And the conjugations for the verbs we're using right now would be yo usaría, tú usarías, él usaría, nosotros usaríamos, ellos usarían. And then yo comería, tú comerías, él comería, nosotros comeríamos, ellos comerían. Yo abriría, tú abrirías, él abriría, nosotros abriríamos, ellos abrirían. You can think of it as more of a mood and not really a tense. Like when you're talking about something hypothetical, uncertain, emotional, or subjective. Think about this. If you're talking about something that's real or definite, like I go to school, that's indicative. But if you say something like, I want you to go to school, that person isn't going to school. You're just expressing a desire that they do go. Let me show you a quick example. Tú hablas español. Quiero que tú hables español. Do you see how one of them is certain and the other one is uncertain? That's kind of the idea. Subjunctive has triggers for their verbs, and these are some of the common ones. So just remember the subjunctive isn't about when something happens. It's about how real or uncertain it is. And the way you form the verbs is kind of odd. For AR, it's yo he, tú es, él he, nosotros hemos, ellos en. For ER, it's yo ha, tú has, él ha, nosotros hamos, ellos han. You can see it's almost swapped in a way. Let me show you how to use it with the verbs. Yo use, tú uses, él use, nosotros usemos, ellos usen. Yo coma, tú comas, él coma, nosotros comamos, ellos coman. Yo abra, tú abras, él abra, nosotros abramos, ellos abran. This is probably the hardest Spanish tense to use and understand effectively, but when you do, it's going to make your Spanish feel and sound a whole lot better. And the next sense is probably just as hard to understand, but again, when you learn it, it's going to make your Spanish a whole lot better. It's called the imperfect subjunctive, imperfecto de subjuntivo. The imperfect subjunctive is used when you're talking about something uncertain, hypothetical, emotional, or subjective, but in the past. So it's really, really similar to the subjunctive. It's like the regular present subjunctive, but pushed back into the past. You'll mainly use it after expressions like I wanted that, I hoped that, it was important that, like etc. etc. Quería que hiciera esto. I wanted you to do this. Now to conjugate it. This is the way it's commonly taught, and I actually have to pull this up because I couldn't even remember it like all the way. You start with the third person plural form, so ellos, ellas, ustedes are the verb, in the preterite tense. So example with hacer, hicieron, they did. You remove the ron ending, hici, and then you add the special imperfect subjunctive endings. So you can either use the ra or the se endings. Both are correct and mean the exact same, but ra is more common. And this way does work. It's just a lot to form it. The way I do it is a little bit different. In the long run, though, it'll make it a lot easier to understand and use better. Let me show you with the AR verb and then the ER verb. Usar, yo usara, tú usaras, él usara, nosotros usáramos, ellos usaran. I remove the AR and then add these endings. Yo ra, tú ras, él ra, nosotros ramos, ellos ran. And then with the ER verb, it's comer, yo comiera, tú comieras, él comiera, nosotros comiéramos, ellos comieran. Abrir, yo abriera, tú abrieras, él abriera, nosotros abriéramos, ellos abrieran. You remove the IR and then add these endings. Yo hiera, tú hieras, él hiera, nosotros hiéramos, ellos hieran. And the same thing with the endings, like yo usase, tú usases, yo comiese, tú comieses. And now for the next conjugation type, the present perfect subjunctive. Pretérito perfecto de subjuntivo. Do you remember the whole haber, a past participle, usado thing, and how those are all the conjugation types with them? Well, I lied. There are a few that are used with the subjunctive, and this is one of them. It works like this. It talks about things you hope, doubt, or feel about, but have already happened recently. You form it with haya, which is the past participle of haber in subjunctive. So kind of like the last conjugation type we did. The only difference is that there's certainty in this one and not really in the last one. It's kind of tricky to figure out, but as you learn, you'll get the hang of it. And remember, it's the subjunctive form of haber, and its conjugations are yo haya, tú hayas, él haya, nosotros hayamos, ellos hayan. And it works like this: haya usado, hayas usado, etc. The next type is even more of a combination. It's the past perfect subjunctive, perfecto de subjuntivo. It combines haber, past subjunctive, and the past participle, like usado. It means if I had verbed, si hubiera blank, si hubiera usado, if I had used, si hubiera comido, if I had eaten, si hubiese jugado, if I had played. Easy enough. Now the next conjugation type is a conjugation type that most Spanish professionals don't even know. It's called the future perfect subjunctive, futuro perfecto de subjuntivo. And this is extremely rare. I personally have never used it. I've barely ever seen it. This is the only conjugation type I would not encourage learning until you're really good at Spanish. But it is still cool to know. You take the future form of haber, conjugated like this. Yo hubiere. And it works like this. Yo hubiere usado, I will have used. Ellos hubieran comido, they will have eaten. Nosotros hubiéramos jugado, we will have played, etc., etc. And now for the last conjugation type. There's technically two more forms, but I'm going to combine them into one because there's really no need for two. They're the affirmative command, imperativo, afirmativo, and the negative command, imperativo, negativo. And they make the command form. The command form is when you're telling someone to do something, like look for my keys, wash the dishes, don't use the car, like that kind of thing. And this is the only conjugation form without yo. Only tú, usted, nosotros, vosotros, and ustedes. Again, I'm not going to show you the vosotros conjugation. I'll make a separate video on that. The to form is easy. For AR verbs, you just remove the R. Usar, usa. For E and IR verbs, you just remove the E or the IR and then add a E. Comer, come. Abrir, abre. For usted, it's just a subjunctive form. Usar, use. Comer, coma. Abrir, abra. For nosotros, you might be thinking, how do I command us? Like, how do you do that? It's pretty simple. It just kind of means let's. So like, let's use the car. Let's eat dinner, etc., etc. It's conjugated by the subjunctive as well. Comer, comamos. Usar, usemos. Abrir, abramos. The ustedes form is also in the subjunctive. Usar, usen. Comer, coman. Abrir, abran. Now for the negative form. The to negative form uses the subjunctive. So usar, no uses. Comer, no comas. Abrir, no abras. However, every negative command form uses the subjunctive. So for ustedes, usted, nosotros, you're just going to add a no before you say the conjugated verb. So usar, use, no use. Usar, usemos, no usemos. Usar, usen, no usen. Comer, coma, no coma. Comer, comamos, no comamos. Comer, coman, no coman. Abrir, abra, no abra. Abrir, abramos, no abramos. Abrir, abran, no abran. And now this next form is probably the easiest to understand. It's called the gerund, el gerundio. It's essentially the ing in English, so use, using, play, playing. For AR verbs, you remove the AR and add ando. For ER and IR verbs, you remove the E and IR and add yendo. Usar, usando. Comer, comiendo. Abrir, abriendo. You also have to take a conjugated form of the verb estar. So yo estoy, tú estás, él está, nosotros estamos, ellos están. Estoy usando, I'm using. Están abriendo, they're opening. And that is it. Every Spanish conjugation type. And one extra that most professionals don't even know. If you weren't taking notes, you're always welcome to come back and rewatch the video. I hope everything made sense. Be sure to like, subscribe for more language and culture content. Have a great day.